Introducing Celigo, the complete integration platform built for both IT and business users that automates your business processes across applications. With Celigo's guided visual interface, building powerful integrations is a breeze. You can leverage hundreds of pre-built connectors to automate key business processes across popular applications. The result? An agile company set for growth. Celigo. Integration starts here. Visit Celigo.com to get started.
Thanks for tuning into another talk here at the Product-Led Festival. Hope you're enjoying the event so far because we've got even more juicy knowledge and insights from product-led pioneers heading your way. Remember to have your questions ready and get the tailored answers you need from the experts themselves. Sit back and enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our final discussion-based session of the event. We've got a fantastic group for you here today, and our wonderful moderator, Betsy Hoyt, who's mobile product manager at Viewpoint, is going to steer the ship. Today we're here to talk about who owns growth, and I don't think we're going to have a silver bullet answer by the end of the discussion, but maybe have more of an idea of how it can look at different organizations. So without further ado, welcome to our fantastic panelists, and Betsy, take it away.
Thank you, Heather. And I am so excited to be here. What a wonderful conference. This has been so well run. The topics have been great. And so if you haven't caught all the sessions, definitely get the replay. But this is really exciting to see all the different comments from around the world. And they're already starting to come in. So just to repeat what Heather said, please ask questions in the chat. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up. If you have some questions, I'll try and work those in. My name is Betsy Hoyt. I am a product manager, and this has been my sole career. And I specialize in mobile. I've been across many different industries of B2B and B2C, and I'm currently in construction technology, and I couldn't have a more engaged audience. I love it. So without further ado, I will have the panelists introduce themselves and give a little introduction, and then we'll get straight to it. So Ray, why don't you start us off?
Cool. Thanks, Betsy. Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Manzano. I'm a senior PM focusing on consumer growth at Adobe Stock. We're trying to build the premier destination for stock content. It's a two-sided marketplace for contributors and creators. Prior to Adobe, I was a PM at Eventbrite, again, working on both sides of the marketplace for our event creators and the consumers. And then before becoming a PM, I was actually in analytics, and I led teams at Pinterest and One Kings Lane.
Awesome. Andre, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Betsy. Hi, everyone. My name is Andre. I'm a growth product manager in Viber. It's a messaging app that connects people all over the world. I have a wide experience in launching different fintech projects all over Asia and Baltic countries. We'll glad to share my experience.
Again, just more example of global unity. Love all the interactions that we have. Anne, over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Betsy. My name is Anne Hollander. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing and Growth at Trimble. I focus in our construction technology division, which is a really cool, fast-growing area of the business, to building out the connected construction ecosystem for our particular clients and industry. Prior to this, I've been across a number of high-growth organizations, everything from Fortune 100 all the way down into small startups, but very excited to be here today to talk about who owns growth.
Right. All right. So last of all, but certainly not least, Vipul, why don't you round us out with the final introduction?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Vipul Baheti. I'm the Director of Product at eBay, and part of my role is to help drive growth here at eBay. And I've been here for 4 years. And before that, I've done product and business development in various companies, including Netflix and Microsoft. And then in my prior life, I did engineering at Qualcomm. That's where I started my career. Thank you for having us here, and I'm super excited about the topic.
Yeah, great. All right, so I have a few questions lined up for you all, and I think everyone can answer on each one. I think we have plenty of time to do so. So let me set up with the first question. I think it's really important that we define the topic, right? So let's start off with defining it, and then how do you define growth? Because it might be a little bit different definitions out there. So who would like to start us off?
I'm happy to go first. And Betsy, I love that you wanted to define it, because I think it's really important when you talk about things like this that everyone's speaking a common language. I think it helps drive alignment, and everyone can kind of move forward with the same understanding. So with that said, I think for me, growth is really about taking a product from 1 to N. So it's not really about working on product market fit work or the development of new features. It's really about the adoption, and it's maximizing the adoption and the usage of product or a feature of your user base.
I like that. I like that. Short and simple, but yeah, I mean, it's, again, underline maximization of the optimization. Really cool. All right. I see some head nods.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I would add on to this. And in fact, it's one of my favorite interview questions when I interview new candidates who are coming in, because you can see who really can tap dance around what is growth. What does that truly mean? Really, as I think about that very similar to Ray, but I look at it from a lever perspective. So we've got levers of acquisition, we've got levers of retention, and then we've got levers of monetization. And depending on where you're at as an organization, one of those levers may be in different spots. And you're constantly working to get those three into the perfect alignment, into the optimized alignment. It's the holy grail problem, right? That we all struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vipul.
I can just build up on what Ray and Ann said, right? Just, like there are these levers that, as Ann pointed, there's acquisition, there's retention. But at the end of the day, what all of us are probably trying to do within our companies when we're doing growth is have more users stick on the platform as we acquire them, right? And that's how I think about like growth. If you do that well, if any company does that well, over time, we see the total number of users on the platform who are engaged increase, and that's really the end goal for most of the companies when we think about growth.
Yeah, for sure. All great points. I don't want to leave you out of the discussion, Andre. So, is there anything else that you want to say, or do you want to mix it up a little bit in dissent?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with what was just said. So in Viber, we have pretty straightforward the meaning that growth is essentially it's increasing the product value and helping some different parts and features become more successful. But in the end of the day, I agree that it should be really connected to staying user in your platform, inside your product, and increasing the activation of your users.
All right, so I'm going to break up the unity here on where we all are of agreeing on the definition, and let's get down to the nuts and bolts of this. Does growth sit under product? Does it sit under marketing? Where does it sit? I know we have opinions here, so civil discourse and go.
Yeah, this totally sits in product marketing. I'm just going to get out there and make a very bold statement that growth totally belongs in product marketing. And okay, why do I say that, right? Let's go ahead and defend this stance and build up this wall here. Product marketing owns a bunch of different things inside the organization. We own the realization of value for our customers. So we work with our product teams who are creating this value. We work with our marketing and sales teams to convert this value inside the organization. And then we work with our customer success and support teams to ensure that that value actually gets delivered across the board. And because we're not seeing things in the individual silos where everybody else is working, and instead holding it together as one glue for that value realization, growth totally lives inside of product marketing.
Ooh, that's very compelling. I'm wondering what our audience thinks. Are there some thumbs up? Don't be shy here. Put some emoticons.
Come on, product marketers. I know you're out there.
Are we going to dissent with Ann? Now, she does have a JD degree, so she does have a very compelling argument here. So do we all agree? Who wants to take another pass at it? Who does growth sit under marketing, or does it sit under product, or somewhere else?
I think people. I think you're muted. I think you were
I was going to respond to that, but Ray, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Sure. I think Andre actually wanted to go ahead.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, guys. So actually, in Viber, I see a very interesting situation because company making transition from the point when the growth was part of the marketing, but right now, company comes to the point when the growth is completely dedicated and separates unit. And it's quite interesting because from my point of view, it's much better structure. First of all, because when the growth became a separate unit, the people who work in the team have much more visibility on the full experience, full user flow and experience of the user. So as an example, if we have a CRM campaign for bringing user back, if user interact with CRM campaign and go back to your app and even perform some needed action, from the marketing perspective, this is a success, yeah. Especially if you have a good CTR and you have a good conversion, everything is perfect. But if you take a look wider on this situation, the whole flow of the user, it's actually just a beginning, because you have plenty of questions that need to be answered. What was exact initial intent of the user? Is he satisfied or not? Did he get enough value to get back to return to the application even without a CRM campaign and even without the additional push or message? And I think this is, if growth is a separate unit, they are unbiased and without a prejudice could take a look on the whole flow. So I think it should be a separate unit, but not under the marketing.
Very diplomatic. I see a few people in our audience agreeing with you of calling out certain titles that are that way. All right. Well, what do you say?
Hey, so basically, what I think is the question. I think of the question a little differently, right? I don't think about the question about like, hey, where does growth sit? It really depends on where the organization is in terms of its scale, its size, on where growth should sit. What I do think about this is, marketing has the job of bringing users onto the platform, whatever that platform is, right? Through paid marketing, through social channels, through CRM, whatever that is, right? And then there is this bridge that the users have to cross to become engaged users and retain on the platform, right? And product on the other side of that bridge is building this product, hoping that users who come on the platform is going to stick. What happens is as users are coming on the platform and trying to cross that bridge and become engaged users, if you don't have a good experience, a lot of people are going to fall through the bridge and never going to make it to the other side, right? And that's where, depending on how growth teams are set up, how marketing teams are set up, how product teams are set up, it is really important, depending on the where the organization is in their journey, that there's extreme collaboration between these teams, or there's one growth team who's sort of like tackling the acquisition problem and the retention problem, right? But really, you have to take a step back and make sure that there are no silos in the organization where, okay, I'm going to let the people come into the platform and I'm going to let them do whatever they want to do, and product is sitting on the other side and has no clue what's going on. And that's where I see a lot of companies sort of failing.
Yeah, I hear from you.
I'll echo that too, for sure, right? And that cross collaboration between those departments, it's inherent to product marketing. It's already there in your organization. Coming right back around.
Nice. I saw what you did there. Nice. But I want to underline something that you had just said, Vipul, because I heard life cycle, because you said the first time they come onto the platform, right? So your first time experience is a little bit different, and your growth metrics are a little bit different when you're trying to get the stickiness, right? And you're trying to get somebody to come back, as opposed to a more established product or a product that you're expecting to have a certain cadence, right? So, I saw Andrew right in there about it. Well, it depends upon the life cycle of the product, because again, your examples, at least I interpreted as the beginning of the life cycle, the first time coming on, and there's definitely a different methodology, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh. So Ray, anything else to add? Do you agree with Anne? Where do you, is it?
Yeah,
what
I'm
is it?
gonna thread the middle a little bit, because I think it, like to Vipul's point, I think it really depends on the life cycle of the company and where you're at. I'll use two concrete examples. So when I was at Eventbrite, the product managers really owned a problem space, and so you'd own the end-to-end potential of an activation, the engagement of the user, and the retention, and so it lived within product. At Adobe Stock, a lot of teams are more feature-based. And so they only own a part of the funnel. And so when you really think about the larger end of like who should own it, like the GTM marketers own the metrics, because they're thinking holistically end to end. They're not just thinking about like, did they use binary? Did they use this or did they not use this? It's like, did we acquire the user and did we retain them? So I think it really depends on structure, but also the life cycle of the company as well.
Oh, excellent point. I think about it selfishly in my career I like it of owning the entire product. I don't want to be the onboarding queen, for instance. And I know that there are some places that are just like, there's going to be two teams focused on onboarding. And while there's nothing wrong with that structure, it is harder to look at the life cycle of the customer when you have to share that. And it sounds like then from your experiences, you have a little bit more of where you divide up the product a little bit more.
I've been on both sides of it, and so it's you need that conductor that's seeing the forest through the trees, right?
Yeah.
And just a 30,000 foot view, and can really orchestrate everyone.
Yeah, I imagine there's some difficulty. I mean, I love having diverse teams that can help everybody tackle that, but I imagine that's difficult.
Definitely. Yeah,
for sure. So I'm going to nudge you just a little bit more on some of the benefits and pitfalls, because I think we're kind of we're getting to the good stuff here. So the structure of the team of like, what do you own on the product, where it is in the life cycle. Is there anything else that comes to mind of how the team is structured on who would own and what are some things you need to do to make sure that you're avoiding those big canyons?
Definitely. And I think this is one of the questions that popped up in the chat here about where does growth sit in the organization? In my experience, I have sat everywhere in the organization. I have rolled up into marketing. I have rolled up into product. I have rolled up into strategy. I have rolled up into finance. And what I have found across the board is that growth is best aligned with that overarching strategy group. So whoever owns strategy in your particular team or your department or your organization, that's where growth begins to happen, because you've got to take those three levers, right? Acquisition, retention, and monetization. If you're taking those three levers of growth, they're the ones that are going to see the overarching picture of where we need to go and how those levers need to be balanced against one another. So with that, then they can go execute underneath that strategic role across the organization, get out of seeing just the trees in order to see just the forest, and then go execute.
I'd love to. I've heard this a couple of times, and it's messing with my mental model. But I typically view the three as acquisition, engagement, and retention. Monetization is typically an output of retention of users, because I think, as we all know, it's a lot harder to bring someone back that's gone dormant to becoming an engaged user again. And it's really like that middle period. I think Vipul was talking about that bridge, right? When we go from acquiring the user to actively becoming like a loyal user. And I think someone asked about like, how do you get a user quickly to the aha moment? And I think that really touches on that. Like there is a focus around developing and cultivating engagement within your user base.
Absolutely. Totally and completely agreed with that. And it's not as though I'm skipping over it. It's more, I like to have a paycheck, right? So we have to monetize our users. So.
Yeah, I mean, really, again, like I think the key here is, that if the business model for the organization is not defined, right, that's where a lot of the focus on monetization comes in, right? But as to Ray's point, if the business model is defined, like if it's an e-commerce company, you're just making sure that users come back and pay and buy an item, right? If it's an advertising model, it's a different thing, right? But depending on like if the monetization is figured out, then it's really about the fact about retention. And if you give the user a happy experience, then the expectation, the hypothesis is that they will come back, and the monetization flywheel is going to keep going. Right. I think that's what Ray was sort of alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a very dynamic process, right? So you may think that you have one thing figured out and then something happens, right? And that something can be big. It can be competitive disruption. It could be something happens in the market. It could be that, any number of things that can happen. And then it will disrupt that balance of those levers. And suddenly you're back at the drawing board all over again. It's what makes our job so much fun. Every day is a new challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The product market fit keeps changing, right?
Always.
It keeps shifting.
Wow. I don't want to get us too off topic, but I think because Anne, you mentioned monetization a few times, and I liked Ray's different angle on that. Aaron Christopher's asking to you specifically, Anne, but I open this up to anybody else. Does sales or customer success own monetization?
Well, certainly, sales is going to get paid based on this monetization. But I think from a strategic perspective, it's instead, when do we require that monetization to happen, right? Is it an engagement? Is it a usage? Is it an adoption? Where in that cycle? And I think that that's a moving target. In a more product-led growth type of environment, sales takes a later role in all of that to ensure really where they become a little bit more on the retention and not just the acquisition side. So you really begin to rebalance roles across your organization as you really get good at growth and the growth models that come along with that.
Mm-hmm. Does that, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I mean, does that change based upon B2B and B2C? Because it's like, if you're buying the app, and there's no other thing, I mean, you're getting it before they're even coming in. But if it's subscription based or you're trying to do other things, maybe that could slightly change, right?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the B2B world, the legacy thought here is, an enterprise SaaS, let's call it, is that you got to have an enterprise account manager, and that account manager is going to help you navigate all of the complexities and gloss over all of the things that product marketing is actively working to try to make easier and better. In a product-led growth type of world, that flips a bit, where that person comes in much later in the cycle to say, hey, we're going to take all of this risk off of you. All of these users are already using it. Let's talk about how we can make this the right value for you. Mm-hmm. The consumer world is a little bit different in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it again, like some comments that I'm seeing of, there's there is some blurring of the lines, right? To capitalize on some things that I'm seeing here of between B2B and B2C. And I know, and you've had I think you mentioned both B2B and B2C, but we have several people here who are really focused on the B2C market. So Ray, I'm going to pick on you for a minute and go, okay, is that, are you in agreement? Is it, does it look the same as B2B, or is it a little bit different?
I think it, for Adobe, particularly the Adobe Stock team, I think a lot of where we've focused in has really been on being product-led, being B2C. We really want to open it up to our customers. Now, with that said, we do have a sales team that's focusing on our enterprise top clients. And so we're trying to do both, and we're trying to do both really well. But where our bread and butter has always been building for the larger user base. And in that instance, it was always going to be product-led for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a great talk on this blurriness earlier from a colleague of ours at Zapier who talks about this, right? The B2B is becoming more B2C oriented in that no longer are you tethered to whatever your boss tells you have to use. Now you can go out and find the thing that can help you do the job the best in this enterprise type of environment, which changes the game completely in my mind. That means that we have to go from a B2B perspective and really start thinking about the user, not just the buyer themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with what Anne said, right? I mean, I think just as you think about your, our worlds, right? It's pretty flexible. What do you want to use for your, sort of doing your release planning, doing your sprint planning? Do you want to use Jira? Do you want to use a Google Sheet? Do you want to use a Note platform, right? I mean, it's all pretty much, open to what the actual individual user wants to do.
Yeah. And Vipal, I just wanted you to know that if you can hear my dog barking, he's saying, yes, you're right. So he's cheering you on. That's not a dissent. Yeah.
Thanks for the acknowledgement.
Yeah. It's important to get the terrier cohort here to back you up. Andre, anything else to add from your perspective as far as does it look the same, product-led growth, B2B, B2C, or maybe you want to talk about some success metrics. I'd let you dig in.
Actually, I agree that B2C more related to how to say more end user success metric. So I agree with you guys.
No, I mean, and it's it gets to I'd like to go to let's talk about some of the skills. We can talk about hard and soft skills that you would need in a growth team or what you would be looking for. So whether you're hardcore, it needs to be in product marketing, or product, but what are you looking for in those skills as you're building up either a team or team members for growth?
I can go first. So, in our world, right, when we think about growth teams, there are 4 or 5 different sort of skill sets that are core. And we try to bring in analytics, design, user research, engineering, and product management, right? That's what I think are the core functions that need to come together. And sort of like what we sort of, advocate is to, align on a metric that you're trying to move, and then do a bottoms up sort of like, ideation and roadmap planning and thinking on what needs to be done to sort of like move that metric, right? So the way this really plays out is, we sort of like then have hypotheses on, hey, these are the customer problems, and these are the hypotheses that we have to solve these problems, and tie them to leading metrics that, ties to some sort of like output metric. And then the team sort of builds out the roadmap. But those key skill sets, what I see in most organizations exist, but they don't sort of collaborate as well. Like design will take ownership of design and, just hand off to engineering or product and sort of build it out and take a step back. Where I've seen that the healthiest sort of like teams and the strongest teams are when everybody has a stake on driving that metric, right? And everybody understands like, what you're building and how customers are reacting to it, and what it's doing in terms of like actual customer experience.
So I'm going to poke again a little bit. Give me some examples of some of those metrics, because I think people would like to know what are some ones that you would look to. I mean, you don't have to be specific of percentages and such, but what do you look at?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you my example from Netflix, and this is public, right? So at Netflix, one of the leading metrics that we had around driving growth or retention was, did the user after signing up actually view content or not, right? And if you did not watch content, within a 1 month period, let's say 30 minutes or 45 minutes of content, that was a pretty good indicator that, at some point when you see the $10 bill or $14 bill show up, you're going to say, hey, what's going on? I'm not using the product. Why am I paying for that? So you will churn out, right? And we saw a lot of that happen. Like when our acquisition tactics were sort of like, not intentional, then we saw that users were churning out. And when the acquisition tactics were actually very intentional, then we would see a healthy retention, right? So that's how, like, that's a great example of like a leading metric. Say, hey, if you have engagement, that's going to drive retention.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, those leading indicators to churn, because by then it's too late. You can't get them back in. It's real hard to get them back in if you're not looking for those leading indicators. So who else wants to talk a little bit more about what are some of those skills?
So I think there are a number of soft skills here that are critically important also. And frankly, if you don't have them in place, then this is where PLG can begin to truly fall apart. The first one is collaboration, and being able to not come in with an ego about, I own this and this is my fiefdom and this is my territory and I am the best, but instead taking a learning mindset coming into things when you're collaborating across the organization. And frankly, even beyond that, when you're beginning to collaborate with prospects and customers and users all across the board. That learning mindset is really critically important to have, simply because growth depends on it, not only personally, right, as we think through a career strategy here, but also for the organization and what you're doing. the things that used to work may not work anymore. Again, it's all about those balance of those levers of that you have in front of you of how you grow. If you can't get those balanced and can't get those teams involved to help balance those on an ongoing basis, this is where things begin to truly fall apart.
Mm-hmm. So I hear you. Collaboration is a key. Are there any other soft skills that you wanted that you were thinking of?
I love people who can tell a story. And who can create that narrative of what that looks like, because they can identify where the pain is without having to actually run into it, right? Some of it is empathy. Some of it is just simply a narrative structure where you can go, okay, this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. And then, oh no, this happens, right? You got to make the story interesting. Something bad has to happen somewhere. And then you working through, okay, well, how do we solve that? And what do we do with that? Coming in with a scientist's acumen with that, with a hypothesis is awesome and great. And I'm a huge advocate of that. But if you can't tell the narrative around that also, right, that becomes really difficult, especially when you're trying to engage other folks to help you fix these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it goes in nicely to the other themes that we're hearing of going, okay, what are the indicators for churn? So if you understand your audience, again, Netflix of going, hey, if you've signed up and you haven't viewed any content, or wherever you are in your organization, or what your product line is, if you haven't done X or Y by this amount of time frame, you got a problem to look into. So what are some additional things that you're looking and opening it up to anybody else of like those skills that you need for that, either that team or within that person to continue with growth?
Yeah,
collaboration is a great one.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add is just like as an organization as a whole, I think patience is really important. Growth is a muscle. And so the team needs repetitions and hypothesis generation, and they get better over time as they practice it more. And so, there's this expectation like, hey, we've spun up a growth team and they expect results right away. And while that may be the case that, there's some low-hanging fruit that you can pick up off the ground, after you pick up that low-hanging fruit, that's when the fun begins, right? That's when you have to be really, you use that skilled set that you pull in, the user research that we've talked about, analytics, marketing, product, and engineering, and that's when the team really gels together and comes up with really great ideas. The other thing that I think is just as important too is building an organization of growth within your company is the evangelization of what your learnings, both your winnings and more importantly, your failures. Because I think, it's one thing to celebrate the wins, but I think it's even more important, like, what are you going to do after you've seen an outcome that wasn't expected, but what can you learn from that and apply it to future things? I think by doing those things and including people along the journey of what you're thinking and why you're doing it, hopefully you can create a place where, I have this mindset and mantra within my teams. It's like great ideas come from anywhere. And once people get work up that comfort level of being able to speak their mind and, generate their own hypotheses as to why they should work on something, like that's when the really nice things happen.
Yeah. I'd read somewhere, so I can't take credit. It's not a Betsy thought here, but is it truly a failure if you learn something from it? Right.
Right. Those are successes, right? Like those are definitely successes.
Totally agreed. And that's the hardest thing to get people to do, frankly. I think it's critically important of going through, okay, we did this, right? And it's a huge culture move. It requires a ton of vulnerability to get out there, especially in front of your colleagues when you're trying to impress them and you're trying to do everything you can. I think that one's a huge one. That's a great call out, Ray.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Andre, I know we're getting later in the evening, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping you engaged and keeping you into the conversation. So come on, jump on in.
Yeah, of course. Actually, I really agree that Anne said about storytelling. I also think that it's really crucial to be a good negotiator and mediator between different stakeholders and owners, because it's a very rare case when you have a very good opportunity in one particular area in your product. Usually, the best ideas and best abilities lay somewhere in the middle, somewhere between the age of different areas and products. and you have to be brilliant mediator to combine, to negotiate with all the people that you need to bring in one place in order to push the idea or validate the idea or push some product in development.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because it's recognizing that, again, good ideas come from anywhere, but what needs to be cultivated, what maybe is a diamond in the rough that just needs a little bit of zhuzh to make that work.
Exactly.
Giving people that confidence to continue to pitch. Yeah, I like that a lot. All right, so my personal favorite question when talking with a panelist, because again, you all have such diverse and awesome backgrounds, and you're all leaders in your own right. So what's that nugget you want to leave people with before we get into more questions from the audience? What's that nugget when you're considering growth at your company that you would like to bestow upon people? And it could be a positive a nugget or oh, please don't do that.
I can go first. I think going back to metrics, right? I think it's super, super important that the entire organization is aligned on metrics, right? What I've seen many companies do, even in my own experience, is that somebody's prioritizing acquisition while the others are prioritizing retention, right? And if you're talking about two different parts of the lever, to Anne's earlier point, then you're not going to be aligned, right? And I've seen that cause a lot of heartburn and failure. So always push your organization to have marketing drive the same goals as what product is trying to drive. If it's all the same team, let's make sure everybody's understands what that the goal here is. So that's my piece of nugget.
Yeah, that's a good nugget. All right, Anne, come on.
My nugget, yeah, I'm thinking about, this is a great question, Betsy. And I know that you and I have talked about this quite a bit. I think, the biggest thing here is that this isn't a constant source of evolution inside the organization. What is right today may not necessarily be exactly right tomorrow as we constantly refine what it needs to grow as optimally as we can. And so, through the culture of experimentation, through trying things out, through failing, through learning, through being successful in different areas, we begin to really think through, okay, what is it that we truly need to grow? And I think organization to organization, that's going to be very different. Some of it's maturity, some of it's size, some of it is whether you started out in one strategy and trying to pivot to another, whether you were sales-led and trying to get to product-led, or you were marketing-led and trying to get to product-led. That evolution is really key, and setting that expectation in your organization is really important as well. One of the pitfalls that I've seen is folks not necessarily aligned. They align at the buzzword. They're like, yeah, PLG, we're going to do it. And then it all kind of falls apart because there was no true actual buy-in, strategy, framework, direction, centralized ownership to a degree of all of the product-led growth initiatives that may be going across the organization.
Yeah, there's lots of, I guess it depends on how you look at it, challenges or opportunities there with that one, right?
In product marketing, it is always an opportunity.
Nice plug. Yeah, nice plug. Ray, what say you? What's your nugget?
Yeah, for me, one of the great things I've learned is, there's a large community of growth practitioners out there, and it seems like everyone's really willing to help each other. And so, being willing and comfortable asking for help within that community, whether it's on Twitter or, joining various groups and anything like that, I think there's a large bouts of information that you can just tap into. And I think what you can do is cherry pick and what works best for you and apply to your company. Because everyone's process will be slightly different, as we talked about earlier today, with just, depending on the stage and your ultimate goals, make it work best for you, and you'll find great success. And then make sure you pay it forward and pass it on, like we're doing today.
Exactly. I take that as it's not a one-size-fits-all t-shirt. So again, it's not that magic bullet or anything there, and you need to adapt as product lines, audience, all of those things, and A/B test it, right? to see what works. Wow.
Absolutely.
Good one. So, Andre, what's your thing you want to leave everybody with?
I want to say that it's always plenty of opportunities, even if it's not obvious, even if you think that you've tried all and this everything is clear for you. There are always ways to find a new approach, to find a new point of view. So, especially in growth. So I think that the best way is to keep digging in things that what you believe, and for sure you will find a great way to success and growth.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So let's get out of the structured portion and let's get there's some great questions that are popping up. And so I'm going to throw out a few that I'm reading here and just jump in if you're excited about answering this. So I like this from, I'm probably not going to say this right, Galan. Are there any problems that can't be solved through a PLG strategy? So don't be glib on this one, but is there anything that can't be solved with product-led growth?
I'm going to try very hard not to be glib. You have my Girl Scout honor. I'm trying hard not to be glib. Yes, there are problems that can't be solved through a specific strategy, right? Strategy is one half of the battle. Execution, if you don't have that in place, it doesn't matter what your strategy is, period, the end. It doesn't matter if it's PLG, doesn't matter if it's any other strategy that may be out there. More specifically for PLG, if you are a sales-led organization right now and you're trying to make the shift into PLG, keeping people on board while doing that, while avoiding the possible fear that I am going to, one, lose my job, lose my livelihood, things are going to change so much, I don't know what this looks like anymore, this is too much change, this is too much change, this is too much change. That's problem number one. The other part of PLG strategy that can be a bit of a pitfall overall is that because it's more retention-based and more product-based, generally speaking, it takes longer to know if you're doing a good job or not.
Patience.
Patience is key here. And there are investors that don't have patience. There are organizations that don't have patience. There are bosses that don't have patience for things like this. And so because of that, if you're in one of those types of organizations, PLG might not be the right thing for you unless you're willing to come to battle every day when you come to work on this front, which, we all do sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What do you think?
Anybody else want to add on to that? Anything that can't be solved from a PLG strategy?
I love Dan's answer. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Point for Anne. Oh, wait a minute. Were we keeping points? I'm sorry. I made this competitive all of a sudden. I didn't mean to do that. So let's get back to some of the questions here. At what point is product ready to grow into a new geography or new industry? So that's a pretty broad question there. But I'm
happy to take it.
Great, Ray. Jump in.
Yeah, well, I think this is like where analytics becomes really important, right? Where you model out your growth model and you figure out when you're reaching that asymptote of, like your maximum ceiling of your efforts that you're doing. And so, what you want to do ultimately when you're building a good growth engine is you want to layer in new features, whether it's through product market fit expansion or building out new features to compel users to move your ceiling a little bit higher. And so building out a proper growth model, and that's really just, for every input that you put into your business, what's your expected output? And that's like a simplified version. There's a huge math equation that you can build to properly do that. But for simplicity's sake, for this piece, let's just call it that. And so when you see that number is starting to slow down, that's when you have to start anticipating what can you do to further that ceiling for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Totally agreed. The short version of that, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. So once you hit that point of stabilization, then it's okay. Well, which path do I want to take to continue to grow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there are other macro events that also will help you decide. So, I was at Netflix when, we went from like 60 countries to 200 countries, where, Reed Hastings sort of like announced that in CES in January. So there was an inflection point in many countries where the internet speed sort of like, didn't exist in prior years to stream, right? And there was a transition happening, right? Countries like India, Brazil, and so many other countries, right, where internet was becoming cheap enough and fast enough. And that's also sort of like, made the company decide that this is the right time. And they've been planning for years, right, on that. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that, it's not always like product driven.
Right. No, that's a great point. So it's beyond just going to where they love you. It's making sure that there's the infrastructure. Is there an ROI there, really, of and what are those? I think of the barriers as sometimes of being big boulders. Can you smash through them, or is it just impossible because of devices or rules and regulations of states, countries, regions? That's a really great point, especially globalization when you're looking at that.
Yeah, and when you think about Uber, right? Like Uber had to like go really aggressive because there were these competitive companies sprouting everywhere, like the copycats, right? And they had to take on a completely different strategy, like to go fast or not be able to have an opportunity. So the first to market was like an important consideration there.
Yeah, because first to market doesn't necessarily always mean best to market, because it was said earlier of like if you're not growing, you're dying. So those pivots are important.
Yeah, I think Uber's a great one also, right? They made the mistake thinking that they could use the scale that they had built in the United States in other countries. And it turned out, no, they had to use the exact same model and build the market presence ground up, body by body. So they couldn't get scale out of the existing resources that they had there. I think that's another consideration to put into this, right? Because it's one of those things that's either going to help accelerate or help decelerate growth.
All right, I think we have a little bit more time here. So until Heather tells me and pulls us off stage, I wanted to get to a couple more questions here. So Katan has, at what point is a product ready to grow into new, oh, no, I'm sorry, I got that one. David, how do you align other pods or PMs on a shared OKR? Especially as it relates to feature cannibalization. So this I'm very interested in, because this is something I'm looking at of like, so again, how do you align them on the OKRs and not cut apart the feature that you were doing in the first place? So let's take the first part. How do you align different PMs on the OKRs? And I would take this from the lens of you might have different people who are looking at different parts of the funnel. So how do you strategize to get people to that same metric, that same goal?
I mean, really, the first place to start is make the metric broad enough to encompass both of their particular needs, right? I mean, that's step one. Step two then is they define the how in that. It's getting them in a room together to define what that how looks like. Mm-hmm. If there's overlaps in the how, then you have to decide, all right, does it make sense to put these two projects together? Does it make sense for the two of them to compete to see who can get it out faster, better, easier? That's certainly the Amazon model of doing things. Or does it make sense that one of these groups pivots into a different particular area that's not being covered in your product strategy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and there's a dance, right? I've been in some advertising companies where if you get more aggressive with advertising, and conversion sort of takes a hit, right? Engagement takes a hit, and then you have to have the explicit conversation on what those trade-offs are. How much are we trying to like balance the lever in one direction or the other? And that's like really the organization strategy. But at the end of the day, like when we talk about growth, I think what is important is that, hey, is this good for our customer? Which metric is really good for our customer, right? And when you sort of ask that, there is a lot of like clarity that helps drive the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that falls in nicely into a follow-up question. So I like it when people are trying to keep us honest here, and don't be afraid to be cheeky as somebody just apologized for doing so. That this is the engagement that is the reason why we're here for these conferences. So feedback is that when we were talking about the barriers for PLG, is it really only internal, or are there external barriers for PLG? And in regards to strategy and execution, are there? I would say yes. Of course, there are external barriers, but want to open that up to the group here.
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely some external barriers to this, right? In the B2B world, if you have a lockdown environment due to regulatory issues or other things, you don't get to choose what you want to use. And in which case, PLG may not necessarily be the right thing for you. I think the other barrier of PLG that we don't talk about very often is, well, what do you do when the baby's ugly and your product sucks? Right? If it's not,
there are ugly babies.
Is on old architecture that doesn't enable you to put decent telemetry in so that you can track usage and be able to onboard users the way that you want to onboard them in a modern environment, it may cost too much for you to take on this type of strategy. It may not make sense for you, and that's okay, right? There are other strategies out there. PLG is one of many, many, many growth strategies that are available to you. So, I mean, really, that's not the only one, but there are many others there that would be a barrier to PLG, in which you would be advised, this might not be the one for you today.
Yeah. Ray, did you want to add anything? I saw you got off mute.
No, I thought Anne covered it perfectly. I think, what we touched on earlier is like, you can take flavors of this and apply it to your current growth model that you have now. And I think that's just as good too. These are meant to be frameworks and guidelines to help you unlock your business as best as possible. And it's not meant to, you have to follow it to a T. And so I think that's just coming into that and knowing that you can still be successful even if you're not following it to a T.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that flows in nicely to Eric's question. And I kind of echo his sentiment here of PLG is the flavor of product today. The term was recently coined, what was that, 2016? Though I would argue that product-led growth existed before we had, the jazzy term here. This one may be a little bit difficult to answer, but as we hear about what adaptations and mindsets are required based upon trends in marketing, development, blah, 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 of all the other ways, a way to think about this is perhaps reflect on what you want to spend your time thinking about and wanting to learn more about. What is it? Are we going to have some adaptations? What do you think we're going to see beyond product-led growth? What happens next, I think, is what Eric is trying to get at. Now, if that's your side hustle and this is where you're going to make money, don't answer. But I think it's a really important question of what comes next after product-led growth.
At the risk of giving away a really good idea, I'll talk about this one, right? So we've seen a rise with product-led growth as a rise of product ops. And the tool stack the tech stack that you have to help manage your products across the board. What I'm really interested in is the data that's coming out of that product piece and into the RevOps environment. So all your revenue operations. So everything from your CRM to marketing automation to all of the cool tools that are used on that side, along with things that are more customer success or retention based ops. And the tool stacks there. I'm really seeing the bridge of product, revenue, and retention all together in one. Is a unicorn platform to help really begin to, one, understand what that full life cycle looks like. But then two, and I think this is an area that's really, really interesting to me specifically, maybe interesting to other people, might not be, but I'm really interested in the optimization of these particular levers, where I can actually not have to worry about getting my churn as low as possible, but instead optimizing what that churn should be, i.e., I don't want to keep that client anymore. They're costing me too much. I'm not making enough money off of them. Their usage sucks. They're never going to say nice things about me. Why? Just goodbye. I'm done. It's over. And if you can get to a point there where you can optimize that, then you can predict it. And then you're in the magic promised land of, okay, now I know exactly how my levers need to be set right now based on the environment that I'm in. Then I work to actually set to those levers that a machine is telling me to do.
So what I'm hearing you say is the next generation of product-led growth is really having an organization that instead of making some of the manual processes and thinking through, we optimize in how we're actually thinking about the construct of the product, how we serve the customer, how we analyze all the things that we're all in.
Right. We've done a great job exposing insights to our customers and telling them that they should be insight driven. It's time for us to take our own medicine on this.
Boom. Right there.
Again,
that was really good.
Interesting to me, might not be interesting to others, but I'm interested to hear what my colleagues think on this. What's the next 3 to 5 years look like? What are you spending your time with these days?
I think for me, I think communities are something that are really interesting to me. With like what we saw this past January with Reddit and everything, community-led growth and how things have gone viral through communities. And so just being able to create these communities where people can talk and collaborate and grow. And like, that's all, they just, they built a forum which people can talk, and like that helped foster a lot of their growth. They had a Super Bowl ad this year thanking them for that. And so I think that's a really compelling and interesting space right now, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, talk about having voice of the customer. I mean, it's you can't have anything more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're getting close to time. I saw Heather pop on there for a minute. She's coming back.
Sorry, I hate it so much that we're pretty much guys. Thoughts and comments. I thought do so much for her. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Okay, I speak robot. So if Heather was robotic to anybody else, I want, or if it was just my special internet,
no,
we all heard it.
That's what this is like, folks. So that's why we have these things. So Heather, this has been amazing. Thank you. If there's any final thoughts as we're getting pulled off stage. Now I'm getting it.
All of us getting it now? No.
Yeah, that we definitely are.
Sorry, I put a battery. But yes, robotic. Still a robot. I will. I'm sorry.